So Birth of a Nation, 1915 to 2008, reductionist qualities, looking at nonlinear imagination, and the idea of applying DJ technique to radically different art forms. So the mix, the idea of sequencing. I'm going to jump from here to one of my favorite comics that just came out, and that is Shooting War, which is a piece that's done as a kind of a webzine that came up as a series of comics that were kind of like, I know the McCain thing is very ironic. So the comic basically was loaded up on the web, and they had different episodes. It is very funny, by the way. I mean, McCain in the comic. Yeah, I know. It's almost science fiction.
Oh, Dan's gonna shoot.
But the reason I'm tying this idea of the graphic design and the idea of the motif to DJing and the idea of sequencing is that, of course, you can see these numbers. You can click, create the sequence. The book, of course, came out and reduced and distilled some of these materials into a nice, firm product of a physical object that people can sell in stores. But the online version was free. So what I'm doing here today is kind of saying a gambit here between connections of sound and compositional strategy, looking at the idea of the motif as not only an open source template or a font that anybody can run with, and the music itself is kind of a series of audio logos. And that whenever I look at a comic, I'm always thinking about the sound of what the scene would be. What would be the musical accompaniment? What would be the score for that? So what I want to do is play a quick example of a rescore of Allen Ginsberg, because in the book we have, the first piece is called A Footnote to Hal, and that's what you hear is, I collect authors' records. So the book has really rare recordings from Gertrude Stein, James Joyce, Jean Cocteau, Antonin Artaud reading from his theatrical excerpts, but they're all remixed, so you get, Gertrude Stein remixed with, I don't know, Wu-Tang Clan or something, So the mashup is something that I think our generation now has taken as our basic way of looking at storytelling. We've now accepted the fact that as a sort of Burroughsian cut-up technique, the basic reality of the DNA of a cut-up technique of 20-second soundbite, 10-second soundbite, how many edits can be put into a space of 30 seconds, and you still are able to tell a story. So one quick example of a remix, and then I'm going to do this Ginsberg thing. Sorry if I'm speaking quickly. This is hip hop, so I'm trying to kind of do a little soundbite connection here. And time being what it is, this is usually like an hour-long lecture. All right, so we skip ahead. 1915 sound system. This is the Italian Futurists. Nice. This was quite controversial at its time, and they actually wanted to erase stories. So people would come to the concert hall, and you'd have someone like Marinetti reducing an entire city to this kind of sense of bullets ricocheting and crazy poetry, but people would be playing these wild speakers, and the audience would become enraged. And this is sort of early punk rock, And what would end up happening is that the audience would start throwing bottles at them, and they'd start playing these weird machines louder. And they said, there's not supposed to be an orchestra, the machines are the orchestra. And so the story would be drowned out by the noise of this. These are called intono rumori. So he also wrote a manifesto parallel to what I'm doing with Sound Unbound, and I found one of the really rare recordings of these, which is in the book. So the manifesto that went with these series of sound, they're called, again, sound generators or noise generators. The book was called Arte di Rumore, or The Art of Noise. And it's essentially meant to be a story about reduction of coherence through sound and noise. And if we skip ahead to 1968, you can see the evolution out of the avant-garde to what I like to think was the Jamaican dub sound system aesthetic. So once you get rid of the band, you're looking at any sound, any document that the human has made as essentially a file that can be remixed and transformed, whether it's text, music, or film. The Jamaican aesthetic was a third world model, whereas if you look at what was going on in London, you have everything from the Beatles trying to figure out how to tell stories with tape loops. Like on the White Album, you have Revolution #9, for example, or there's Satanic Majesty's Request, the Rolling Stones album. Those are all tape loop albums that were essentially collage. In high culture, you have people like Steve Wright doing tape collage, reducing stories to motifs. There's a very famous piece called Come Out to Show Them from 1968. So what I'm trying to figure out with you guys is telling stories in sound and how we make a literary connection. So the reductionist model here is we have the word phonograph, which essentially means phonetics of graphology, writing with sound. So it's an invisible medium. It's something that evokes stories, it evokes a sense of history, narrative, but it's also something that vanishes in the air when it's over. So the book, Sound Unbound, was trying to figure out how do we get authors, writers, and composers to really start thinking about the 21st century's impact of this idea of the networked creative process. So I'm going to play this example. Hold on 1 second. And then switch over to Ginsberg. There we go. Our favorite guy. 1 second. It's just going to take about a moment. And the processor speed is slow on this computer. There we go.
During these last few months.
Wait, hold on, okay. Well, this is the guy who invented the street light, but that's a different that's a different story. Let me just play that from the QuickTime, because otherwise it's going to take a while to load. Actually, you know what? Even better, I'll just skip ahead, because this is non-linear here. Let's play you guys Allen Ginsberg remix of Howl. 1 second.
Hi, my name is Harry Belafonte. I'm an artist, and I'm not a politician. But like most Americans, I have a great interest in the political and the economic destiny of my country. I'm seated here with Senator Jack Kennedy. As a Negro and as an American, I have many questions, and I'm sure everyone does, about civil rights, about foreign policy, about the economy of the country, and about things that will happen.
And I want to make it very clear, Harry, that on this question of equality of opportunity for all Americans, whether it's in the field of civil rights, better minimum wages, better housing, better working conditions, jobs, I stand for these things. The Democratic Party under Franklin Roosevelt stood for them.
I'm voting for this senator. How about you?
Vote for a leader like Roosevelt. Vote for John F. Kennedy for president, 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 president.
All right, so say for example, if that was one piece, and then we bring in Ginsberg, who, you know, sort of was the poet laureate of the beat scene, but we fast forward to hip hop.
After 11, it's true, I got caught in the world. When I was young, great took me off. Other teachers followed, better prepare for death. Though kind of possessions. That was when I was young. I was warned. Now I'm a senior citizen and stuck with 1 million books, 1 million thoughts, $1 million, $1 million loves. How will I ever leave my body? Allen Ginsberg says, I'm really up shit's creek. I sat at the foot of a lover and he told me everything. Fuck off, 23 skidoo, watch your ass, watch your step, exercise, meditate, think of your temper. Now, I'm an old man and I won't live another 20 years, maybe not another 20 weeks. Maybe the next second I'll be carried off to rebirth, the worm farm. Maybe it's already happened. How should I know, says Allen Ginsberg. Maybe I've been dreaming all along.
All right, so given our time constraints, I definitely just want to do that as a little improvisation. And imagine, you know, this kind of notion of storytelling and the way the beat poets were trying to figure out how to innovate with language, whether it was Amiri Baraka, Jack Kerouac, or of course Ginsberg, and William S. Burroughs' cut-up technique. All of that has distilled out of the beat poetry of that era to the rhythms of a relentless electronic minimalist era of our hip-hop, techno, drum and bass, and all these new forms of storytelling. So that leads me to Cory.